Hi, I'm Tom. And definitely very true about the crazy. There's days where it's like, this is a crazy idea. It's ridiculous. And the loneliness, yeah, feeling like I'm, a team of one and everything. Thank you for being here, though. This is awesome. I love this group. I'm really excited to hear your questions because I know you guys are going to think of things that I've never thought about. I was a manager, became a management coach, and I created my company Sendline really for one reason. I wanted to guide managers into becoming great bosses, and that's really it. And so I work with managers, I work with their companies, I work with nonprofits, doing workshops and retreats that I like to say are a low polish, straightforward, just really genuine alternative to what I feel like we've come to expect management training to look like. And I do it right down the street in Leavenworth at Lodge Camps. And as a manager at REI, so I worked at REI for about 16 years, almost before I left in July of 2018. And as a manager, I would do a lot of training. I would go to management seminars, I'd go to leadership conferences, and I always walked away feeling like I didn't get a lot out of it. I always wanted something more tangible. I wanted opportunities to just talk to people as opposed to being talked to. And so our workshops, our retreats are very small. They're no more than 8 people, very conversational. We talk through the hard stuff about what it looks like to be a manager. And besides just wanting to guide managers into becoming great, there's another reason I'm standing up here in front of you and sharing my idea with you on a Wednesday morning. And it's really because of a boss that I had, this guy Mike. And so my family and we moved here in November last year, so we've been here for about a year. And about 3 weeks after moving into our house, I was going through kind of the last boxes. It was a box of file folders. So I'm putting these file folders away, and I come across one that I had labeled development. And so I was just flipping through it, and it was mostly stuff that I had kept from my career at REI. And I was flipping through it, and I came across this email from Mike. So I had a printout of this email. And so I was reading it, I was rereading it. It's dated Tuesday, December 19th, 2006. And he starts out by saying, Tom, I'll be at headquarters next Tuesday. I'd like to review what we have for our project spread. Parentheses, yes, that's still my responsibility. Then he goes on, other topics I'd like us to discuss. 1, your future, where you want to be in the mix at REI. Some advice from me on what you should be doing to position yourself to get what you want. And then adopting a mentor, probably someone you can use as a coach, a teacher, a confidant, someone respected by their peers, management, and direct reports, kind of the direct opposite of me. Mike didn't realize the irony in that statement. Here I am talking about him 13 years later. So some food for thought, mull it over, the times will be a-changing, and I want to make sure you're able to get what you want. Now, the fact that I have that email 13 years later is testament to the impact that Mike had on me. In my career, I never achieved more than I did working under Mike, and that's not a coincidence. And it's not a coincidence that I have that email. And so when I say I want to guide managers into becoming great bosses, what I mean really is I want to help people who are managers understand what it looks like to be what Mike was to me, to the people that report to them. Like, how can they be a boss that 13 years later, somebody that they managed pulls out an email or a note or a card or a thing that they got from that boss? How do I do that? And the challenge really is I can tell that story. I can say it's really cool, it's really exciting, because it is cool. I've designed it in a way that I, as a manager, would actually get excited about. And I've had people say, I'm really excited for your workshop, which is crazy, because the thing is, it's management training. And that's the challenge, because there's a lot of perceptions about management training. One of them is, it's kind of lame. It's boring. It's nothing anybody really looks forward to. They just do it because their boss told them mostly, or because they feel like they have to or whatever. But it's not something they actually get excited about. And 2, we don't need training. Our managers, they don't need training. They got it. So how do I bust through those kind of perception barriers that A, it's kind of lame, so I'm not really going to prioritize it over the million of other things I've got to do, and 2, we don't really need it. So I'd love to hear questions and ultimately your thoughts on how to get through those challenges, because that's the 2 that I get hung up on the most. The workshops are a day and the retreats are 3 days. It was designed as a 3-day retreat, the curriculum and everything, the way I designed it, because I really feel like it's important to get away from the office for more than just a day. The thing is, with a day, people are still thinking about going home that night, what I got to make for dinner, what I got to pick up at the store on the way home, stuff like that. So they don't really disconnect. And in my experience, the ones that really had the impact on me are the ones that lasted longer than a day. The ones where I had a chance to really get to know the people that I was with, which is the reason it's really small. So it's a little bit of a challenge trying to sell the retreat idea and how to come up with a compelling reason. Like, no, you need to spend $2,500 instead of $750 on a 3-day retreat. Really, seriously, because it's so much more impactful. Trust me, it's hard to convey that message really compellingly, but it was designed as a 3-day. I saw an opportunity with some feedback I got that, hey, could you offer a 1-day option? And I see the benefit in that in the sense that it at least provides an opportunity to start a conversation with managers, to get them to thinking about their role and how awesome their role can be, at least even in just a day. So there's 2 options. So it's actually, there's 3 customers that I try to connect with. One of them is just a manager, an individual manager. Like, as a boss, I would go out and find training and then present it to my boss and say, hey, I saw this training, can I take it? 2 is HR people, folks in HR. So I'm working with somebody at REI actually to potentially partner and be a service provider as a management trainer for REI. And then 3rd is it would be kind of the business owner, like the business executive, executive level at corporation, or a business owner who has a team of managers. So any of those 3. Right, as a business owner, right? That story would be, there's the sales story there, is like, hey, I'm gonna help you. Like, envision your team. How does it look if your managers are all top performing managers or something like that? It definitely is. It's been, yeah, it's I've had mixed results. So, and that's why I feel like the challenge really comes down to the point about it being management training. And it takes somebody like a business owner or anybody I'm trying to speak to really kind of fess up that, yeah, I need some help here, which has been a little bit challenging too, of, admitting, yeah, I don't have the amazing team that I tell everybody I have. I actually need some help to get my managers to where they could be amazing. Yes, it's any company that's got a management layer, essentially. So it could be small, it could be big. And I think that there's opportunity for me to look more at the smaller businesses, which is why I was excited to present here, just because I've been mostly going after bigger companies and to varying degrees of success. There's a threshold, it seems like, with companies who could just do this internally. They can just hire staff, whatever. And internally, I can tell you as a boss, as a manager, it looks very different. Like training. Internal training looks very different than external training. It's totally watered down, it's HR approved, it's not very useful. And in my experience, has been very useful. And so it's part of the pitch is, there's a different perspective I can provide as an external provider. Anyway, but the point being, getting back to your question, Matt, is just, yeah, it's any company that's got a management layer who values the purpose that their managers serve, really. And then there's also just the individual manager too. Like, if I can find people just as a manager themselves saying, hey, I want to take training and I found you, I would certainly serve them too. Both. And there's pros and cons. I don't know what your experience is. In mine, there's pros and cons to both. There's the pros in having like a varied group from different companies as you meet other people from other companies and you get a different perspective, which is kind of cool because you can get really siloed working at one company for however long. So there's pros to that. There's cons to that in the sense that, you might not ever see these people again. So flip side, with a company, they bring a group in like REI did, there's pros to that is, you can have coffee for them at the cafe a week or a year later and talk about this stuff. Cons are you don't get that same varied perspective, so you don't necessarily hear from other people at other companies, which to me has sometimes been helpful to know, like, hey, I'm not the only one, trying to face this issue. Like, it's not just me and my team or my company even, it's this totally other company has the same problem I'm feeling. So there's some benefit to that. So we do both. basically, to answer your question. Yeah. Good question. It's between 4 and 8. Okay. So under 4 people seems like it's actually kind of awkward. And then above 8, I look at it like a dinner table, essentially. That's the analogy I use, is like when you're sitting around a dinner table, you know, of about 8 people, 6 to 8 people is really great. You can all have one conversation. When it gets bigger than that, you know, it starts being 2 different conversations because you got the kids table and you got the, or whatever, you know, you got the 2 tables, that kind of thing. So 8 is the max, and 4 is the minimum. Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to do one retreat, my goal, one retreat a month. So a 3-day retreat every month. I would take a workshop once a month. And then ultimately, my vision for this is, so we work with Lodge in Leavenworth, and I primarily work with the outdoor industry just because I have a lot of contacts in the outdoor industry from being at REI for so long. And I feel like it's an underserved, underknown industry, honestly. There's a lot of folks going after tech and medical, you know, pharmaceutical and health and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of companies specifically targeted at serving the outdoor industry. So anyway, we work in Leavenworth at Lodge, but they have places in Bend, they have a place in Breckenridge, and they're gonna be expanding to mountain towns throughout the West. And so it would be really cool to create a community for people in like companies in Seattle, Wenatchee area through Leavenworth. Same thing with the Bend, Portland mix of companies in Bend. Same thing for Denver and, you know, kind of the Front Range companies in Breckenridge. So creating these small pockets of communities where managers have come to events. And then one thing I didn't mention is after a workshop and retreat, I'm going to throw a couple times a year, again, this is part of my vision, just like events where people can come together. Anybody who's come to a workshop or a retreat can come. It'll be at, like, imagine Mission Ridge. We do a ski day or something like that, or we rent out a campground on Icicle Creek or something like that, and anybody who's gone to an event can come hang out. There'll be music, you know, drinks, food, swag, speakers, things like that. Just, you know, a big event where everybody can come together, meet new people, that kind of thing. So one of the ways I'm trying to do that is with those events. So those periodic events where anybody who's come to a retreat or workshop can come, just totally casual, just hang out and do outdoorsy type of things. The other thing we do is we have a Slack workspace. So everybody who comes in gets access to our workspace so they can just continue to communicate and stuff like that. And it's designed, again, it's designed as a 3-day retreat because that gives people really a good chunk of time to get to know one another. But they're small, because there's 8 people or fewer, because I want everybody to get to know one another well enough that after they leave, they actually stay in touch. And I was in this one program through the Outdoor Industry Association, this leadership academy, and there are people who still, when they travel cross country, they find each other. I've done this myself. I find a buddy who was in this program, and we meet up. So it's crazy. I ran into one in Portland at a restaurant once. So like, hey, so I mean, that's what I want to create is those, you know, design it in such a way that people really connect while they're there, so they continue to stay connected after. And I don't have to really do anything about that because I don't want to have to always prompt it and stuff like that. I want it to be a really natural, organic thing. No, that totally makes sense. That's a really good idea, actually. And I've been toying with the idea. One of the reasons, again, I'm here is, you know, if you guys know of opportunities like that, I would be absolutely 100% down to go and do a lunch and learn or something for an hour and just kind of, you know, present, again, just a little tidbit of what I believe in as far as, you know, my approach to becoming somebody who you're going to save their email to.
I'll chat with you afterwards.
Okay.
Got some ideas on how you can do that.
Thank you. It's an interesting concept. So I was working with this group in Montana, and I went to their retreat. So it was not in Leavenworth, but I went to their 2-day retreat that they had. And I thought about that in the back of my mind. Like, I did all this thing, and you leave, and you know, I forget who mentioned it, but you leave and you don't know really what happens afterwards. Oh, it was that guy. Yeah. And so it was kind of in the back of my mind, like, well, what if I came back in a year and we started kind of a little bit where we left off, but then took it a little bit further and checked. So that subscription model is interesting. Yeah, it would help me even, because one of the things I struggle with is feeling like I actually provide value. As you do this and it feel like, wow, I hope somebody remembers something I said. I have no idea if they do or not, and it's just for me, but yeah, I mean, from a business case standpoint, having that as an option I think could be interesting. Okay, thank you. Did you have more questions, or there's a few more? Okay, all right, we'll keep going. Can you put any numbers for me? Yeah, and I've worked through that. Maybe I should have said that's my biggest struggle. Like, I kind of broke it up into two things, but that's a really big one. Like, because I feel like we as a human society have figured out how to measure stuff really well, and we're at this place where we've measured everything that we can measure, but we need to get into this really uncomfortable space of accepting that we can't measure everything, and this is one of those examples where you can't really measure it. And so I've come back and forth. It's very difficult to measure, and I've thought of things.
Measurement is probably better efficiency down the road, less turnover.
Right. And I think about little things like, okay, so if this is your manager and they make X amount of, say they're making $70,000 a year, and all of a sudden they got a team of 4, and they all of a sudden make, avoid somebody from leaving. So you avoid, having to train somebody for a year. The turnover cost is, a year's salary or something. So you spend $2,500, your potential ROI is, $50,000 or whatever that employee that's working for this boss is. Right. So there's some numbers there. I want to avoid being that guy who's like, because I've seen these numbers. Your team came to Sendline and they have 50% better communication. Like, what? So I don't want to do that. But to your point, like if you have suggestions on how to tell an ROI story to a business owner, to somebody who's watching the bottom line, that would be amazing. Right, right. And I feel like I'm in that process with REI right now. Sorry, I'm just gonna try to get to the older hands first, not age. Longer held up. I'm sorry. It's really funny you mentioned that, because I started this idea as a backpacking idea. And I piloted that idea and realized this is going to be really hard to get permits from the Forest Service, stuff like that. But to your point, yeah, the experience piece.
As a business.
If I can, real quick. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, making that transition from what I would almost not in my gut, but from a business, trying to think about like the business owner, like thinking, hey, here's management training. You could buy into that because you know management training, right? As opposed to an experience, which is like, to me, it feels a little bit more squishy. So you're saying sell the experience and not package it as management training, which is kind of curious because does that work for you all? Like selling it as an experience as opposed to saying here's management training for your team? Yeah. Oh no, I love questions. I love coffee. You know, I love talking on the phone. It's cool. I miss talking on the phone. I feel like it's been an underused resource for a while. But yeah, call me. Let's get coffee, whatever. I appreciate it. Thank you again so much.